It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dove, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dove.
Yes, hello and welcome to the SNL Hall of Fame Roundtable. This is the show in which we invite SNL Hall of Fame voters, in this case, all former guests on this podcast. We invite those voters, former guests, to share their ballot and their thought process behind their choices. So this is always an interesting exercise to get the psyche of some of our voters. So in previous roundtables as well, we've had panelists even cut deals with each other for votes. We've had panelists change each other's minds. So there's going to be some like wheeling and dealing. There's going to be a lot of that going on maybe tonight. Maybe with our esteemed panelists that we have on this particular SNL Hall of Fame roundtable. So why don't we get to it? Let's introduce our wonderful panel. And I'm doing something a little different just off the top. I'm going to let the listeners know that I'm doing a little icebreaker question to just kind of briefly get to know each of our panelists. So the question is, which current cast member, not including Kenan Thompson because he's the obvious choice. So which current cast member, not including Kenan Thompson, could you see in the SNL Hall of Fame one day? So that's going to be our little icebreaker once I introduce our wonderful guests. So let's get started. Darrin Patterson, co-host of the SNL Nerds podcast. Darrin, thank you so much for returning. You were on our Tom Hanks and Dana Carvey episode, Tom Hanks, an SNL Hall of Famer. We'll see about Dana Carvey. Thank you so much, Darrin, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Tom. This is fantastic.
Yeah, we're excited. So the question is, aside from Kenan Thompson, which current SNL cast member could you see in the SNL Hall of Fame one day?
I can only pick one because, I
don't know. Let's see. Who's your main one?
The main one from this cast, I probably would say Colin Jost.
Okay.
Just because he's he's been on the show for so long. He's written so many. He's written a ton of, cold opens, and he's, him and Che have been the longest running SNL Weekend Update news anchors to date. So that's why I was thinking Jost and Che probably as a duo I could definitely see making it into the Hall of Fame. I could also see Bowen making it into the Hall of Fame in the future. I mean, first Asian cast member and he's made so many memorable, stints on Weekend Update. I mean, the iceberg sketch alone, just exactly. Yeah, and even before that, I still remember when he made his first appearance. He wasn't a cast member. Well, it was in the Sandra Oh episode where I think he played. I forget who he played, but he left an impression on a lot of people's minds where people were like, who is that guy? That guy is hilarious. And then the next season he became the cast member. So I could see Jost, Che, Bowen.
Ego, that's a little. I like Ego that. I think Ego's a good choice. I think Jost and Che someday going in as a duo is interesting. It'd be like the Al Franken and Tom Davis. They'd kind of be on the ballot together. Wonderful choices. I can see all three of them someday. So next we have on our panel, from TV show graphs, I say from TV show graphs, but I don't know if you are TV show graphs, if you just have taken on, that's your persona, you are TV show graphs, or you're just from or the creator of TV show graphs. So
I'll take it either way.
Just take it either way. Yeah, so Jamie Burwood, who was a previous guest for the Molly Shannon episode in season 1, also my guest for Will Ferrell, who is in the SNL Hall of Fame, and somebody who's on the ballot right now, Christopher Walken. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining me, and you got to answer this question.
Yeah, the icebreaker. Okay. So I feel like those were all really good answers. Bowen was my initial just gut reaction. I feel just in terms of having that it factor where I feel he'll continue to have that longevity and association with the show. I would say my other, like, maybe future-looking pick would be, like, J.A.J., just, like, thinking about where I could see things going in the next few years and just, like, how unique it is, I think, for someone to come in with such the positive reception that he had. And I feel like there's just an element of what he's doing that feels like really timeless comedy that, like, people could continue to appreciate for many, many years. So I would throw him into the mix, but agreed with the other options as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see J.A.J., master impressionist. I feel like we'll be talking about his impressions for years to come, like how we talk about Daryl Hammond, for instance. I think that's a really good choice. So thank you so much, Jamie. Next we have who is the co-host of the Bigger Than the Game podcast, which is a really great sports and pop culture kind of podcast that I enjoy listening to. And he was my guest this season on the Dick Ebersol episode, which I found fascinating. He's going to be a really fascinating one here on the ballot. So Mr. Deremy Dove, thank you so much for joining me, Deremy.
Thomas, I'm so pumped to be on with everybody. I'm honored, honestly, to talk about SNL Hall of Fame and see if my ballot can measure up to everyone else's. And I'm open-minded, so if someone brings up a great point and maybe I'm like, I got to add this person or cut someone off, so I'm excited.
That's what we're doing here. We're wheeling and dealing.
Wheeling and dealing.
It's going to be, you can exchange votes. You can talk somebody into or out of a vote. It's going to be, you can do with this as you please. So, Deremy, which current cast member not named Kenan Thompson could you see in the SNL Hall of Fame someday?
For me, it was the slam dunk, and you kind of made that point of the way like Franken and Davis are a duo, and they're always going to be remembered as that duo. But Colin Jost and Michael Che, just what those two, the chemistry that they have, the way that they bring. I always love it when someone makes Weekend Update appointment television, and those two have really done that, and they've really, brought that to the zeitgeist, where I know plenty of people who don't watch SNL but want to watch those two and see what they're going to do. And I think also what they're doing as, head writers and behind the scenes, I'm interested in, once they're done with the show, to kind of look at their legacy and see, like, they're going to be in that category where I don't know if we fully appreciated all that they've, contributed to the show. So those are my two that I look at as slam dunk Hall of Famers.
Yeah, so it sounds like when it's time for Michael Che and Jost to be up for consideration for the Hall of Fame, Jamie Dew and I are going to have a conversation about, should we put them in as a duo?
Right.
Should we put them in together? So that's going to be interesting. You and Darrin both brought up really great things for consideration. So Deremy, thank you so much. And finally, we have someone who's an improv and sketch performer, currently based in Chicago, also a frequent guest on our good friends at the Saturday Night Network. She's a frequent guest on their network, and also my recent guest on the Amy Poehler episode of the SNL Hall of Fame. So Victoria Franso, thank you so much. Welcome to the SNL Hall of Fame Roundtable.
I am so excited to be here. This is my first, hopefully not my last, but this is, it was very difficult to try to rank these people because you think everyone deserves, not everyone, but a lot of people deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
So aside from Kenan Thompson, who we can all agree is the obvious choice among the current cast member, who from the current cast could you see in the SNL Hall of Fame someday?
So I'll be really honest and say that this current cast is killer. They have some really awesome folks on here. And I think besides Kenan, the obvious would be, as mentioned a few times here, would be Colin Jost and Michael Che. But I'm actually stuck between Chloe Fineman, Heidi Gardner, and Ego Nwodim. I think...
Ooh, yeah,
I think Chloe's impressions and characters are really one of a kind and really unique to her. And then, of course, Heidi and Ego, I think arguably too, could potentially be a duo as well, kind of like a Tina and Amy situation. But yeah, those are the three I would say could be up in the Hall of Fame one day.
Yeah, especially I hope Ego and Heidi especially. I think they've turned in with a lot of Chloe is still potential, but I think with Heidi and Ego, I think they've already started to establish a body of work, and I hope they get their proper dues. So thank you so much for.
I do want to give an honorable mention to James Austin Johnson, like I think Jamie just said too, because he did his first episode, was the first person we saw in a cold open. I don't think we've ever seen that, or if we have, it's been a while. So that's in itself, I think, Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah, when he was a newbie, he just came out and just did Joe Biden, an impression of Joe Biden, like immediately.
Yeah.
So that has to be points once, a long time from now, maybe when James Austin Johnson is up for a nomination. I'm sure that'll be mentioned. So thank you, all of you panelists. And now I want to ask you guys, so we changed the voting process a little bit this time around. So now voters are required to vote for at least one person in each of the main categories. So we have as the categories cast member, host, musical guest, and writer. So voters have to vote for at least one person in one of those categories, and then you have 11 votes to do as you please. You can just vote for 4 nominees and that's it. You can use all 15 votes that you have at your disposal. It's up to you. We've had a wide range over these last few voting cycles. So I'm going to start with you, Victoria. How many votes did you use on your ballot and why?
I used all because I'm a sucker. I can't choose.
You're just you're putting positivity out into the world.
I mean, it's if you're on Saturday Night Live, you're on there for a reason, right? They don't just choose anybody. So I think it's hard to not use all of my votes. I had a hard time. So, yeah.
So Victoria, 15 votes that she's going to use on her ballot. Deremy, how many votes are you using?
I used all 15 as well, so I'm with Victoria. I went all 15, and for me, it's just, this ballot is tough. I start to feel now for people who have to really vote for people in Hall of Fames, like, in sports Hall of Fames, like, I'm always getting on them. How could you leave this guy out, or how you leave that person out? But it is hard, and for me, being a lover of history, and I love looking at things in a historical aspect. So there's like the heavy hitters who are like the automatic slam dunks on the ballot, but then there's other people who maybe they don't get the recognition from the public, but their historical value to the show and what the impact that they made, I take that into consideration big time. So I used all 15.
So Jamie Burwood, how many votes did you use on your ballot?
Yeah, so keeping it going, I used all 15 of my votes as well. For me, this was just a super stacked ballot. Honestly, even more so than the last voting round. I really struggled to even narrow it down to the 15. And I think for me, just realizing how many different ways people can contribute to the show as well, like looking at the list of writers, looking at hosts, it's so hard to compare apples to apples. So yeah, I had no problem using all 15.
Yeah, and I do have a feeling that most of our voters will use all 15 of their votes. I know I'm a voter as well. I think I'll probably use all 15 votes. It's just a kind of a stacked class, and there's a lot of tough decisions to be made. So I think you all are not alone in using all 15 votes. So let's get to it. I'm going to name the nominees just to reiterate again for our listeners, and then we will reveal everybody's ballots. So the nominees for this year's class, for the cast member category, we have John Belushi, Dana Carvey, Jane Curtin, Jan Hooks, Bill Murray, Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph, and Molly Shannon. For hosts, we have Drew Barrymore, Candice Bergen, John Goodman, Elliot Gould, Buck Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Melissa McCarthy, John Mulaney, Paul Rudd, Emma Stone, Justin Timberlake, Lily Tomlin, and Christopher Walken. A lot of hosts on the ballot this year. Musical guests, we have Beyonce, Elvis Costello, Miley Cyrus, Dave Grohl, Paul McCartney, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Prince, Rihanna, and Paul Simon. And for the writer category, we have James Downey, Al Franken and Tom Davis, Jack Handy, The Lonely Island, Conan O'Brien, Michael O'Donoghue, Paula Pell, Herb Sargent, and Robert Smigel. And we also have kind of a wild card nominee here. So he's not part of one of the 4 main categories. So voters do not have to vote for him. There's no separate producer category. But if somebody chooses, they could use one of their 11 remaining votes to vote for Dick Ebersol, who is on the ballot. Deremy's giving the thumbs up. He was my guest on the Dick Ebersol episode. And I'm curious to see what you all have to say about Dick Ebersol when we get to him. If we get to him, I have a feeling we will get to him, though. So now's time where we reveal your ballots. So I want to start with Darrin Patterson. So Darrin, who's the first person you would like to talk about from your ballot?
First person I'd like to talk about. Maybe we'll go with musical guest, just because it's like I only chose 2 people from there, really. So yeah, musical guest. The first person who I think it's a no-brainer that they should absolutely be in SNL Hall of Fame, Mr. Paul Simon. He was there. He's been there since the beginning. He's good friends with Lorne. He's always sort of been, I guess, sort of the de facto default musical guest, like when the show was first starting. Of course, there was, he's been in a few sketches here and there. There was the famous sketch where he had that sort of reunion with Garfunkel and, kind of, maybe not nice words were said. Of course, there was the cold open where he was like dressed, or the opening monologue rather, where he's dressed like a turkey for the Thanksgiving episode. Like, he's always just sort of been, this sort of old soul, this old presence of the show for like forever. So number 1 musical guest, Paul Simon.
And as I told my guest on that episode, Maddie Price, we're kind of playing fast and loose with the criteria for Paul Simon, because he was only billed as a musical guest 8 times, I think, but he played music on the show about 15 times. So I think we should I would implore voters to maybe take into account all 15 of those times. He was host and he performed music. He performed music when he wasn't billed as anything on the show. So Paul Simon, maybe Lorne Michaels' best friend and just part of the fabric of SNL. So wonderful pick, Darrin. Do any of you have Paul Simon on your ballots?
Yes, he was my slam dunk musical guest as well. I think about 2 things: what happened after 9/11 and him singing The Boxer, and that whole moment kind of helped to, in a way, heal the country. And such an iconic moment in SNL history, with Giuliani and all the firemen, behind and Lorne coming on stage. And I also think about the SNL 40th and the fact that I think Paul was touring, I forget where, but Lorne pretty much saying, like, I need you here, you have to come. So Paul Simon flying in, like, on the red eye to be there for that event, but just kind of showing how important his place is, not just for Lorne, but SNL history. So Paul Simon was my musical guest, slam dunk.
No, very good. So Jamie, Victoria, do either of you? Jamie, do you have Paul Simon on yours?
Yeah, I did, and I struggled with the music category a bit as well, but I did end up including him. I think something that comes into play for me, and there's so many different factors, but I think like impact across decades is something I talked a little bit about last time, and I think for all the reasons that were said before, but also I think for that like longevity and like having impact in different types of ways was what pushed him over the edge for me.
Yeah, his first appearance was in the 2nd episode of the show. And that was basically the Paul Simon show, which is in 75 in season 1. And then his most recent, I believe, was 2018. So you're right. I mean, just spanning eras more so than almost anybody in the show's history. Victoria, what do you think? Paul Simon make your cut?
You know what? He did not, but that doesn't mean I don't think he's eventually worthy. I mean, I do think he's worthy, but I only had so many votes.
Sure.
So, no, for my musical guest, I chose Beyonce. Has the most Grammys, has, played such a significant part of SNL outside of her physical appearance on the show, has made, she's a global icon, and, are we going to forget like the Justin Timberlake, Lonely Island sketch? No, Beyonce. So double dipping. Triple dipping.
Yeah, so a musical guest though, that's great. And I've noticed in the past that musical guests have been kind of shut out. I mean, they have been shut out as far as voting goes. So it's kind of neat to see all of you have at least one musical guest, if not more. So specifically to Beyonce, Jamie, Deremy, Darrin, do any of you have Beyonce on your ballot?
I
Darrin,
did
you
not.
shake. Jamie, why not?
Wow.
I didn't. I think it was just a limited slots. I feel like there's folks where I'm like, okay, next time I'm getting them on, and then we'll see what the ballot looks like next time. I feel like it's always super crowded, but I'll keep her on my short list for next time.
Deremy, are you on Victoria's side or?
Sorry, Victoria. It's 0 for 3. I gotta not go with Beyonce on my list. It's just she's iconic. She's great. And like Darrin said, no disrespect to the Beehive because they're always listening, but I just don't associate her for SNL Hall of Fame. She Hall of Very Good, but not the Hall of Fame. So I have those. I got tough standards. So no Beyonce on my list.
So if we're taking this 4-person sample size, Beyonce may have to wait next voting cycle, and we'll see. Unless the Beehive kind of gets wind of this, and I'm sure they'll push her over the edge.
All it takes is one tweet.
It just takes one. Oh no, that sounded like a threat by Victoria. Yes. I heard that in your voice, Victoria. We'll see. All right, mobilize the Beehive. Let's go, Deremy. I want to stay with you. Who do you want to talk about?
I'm gonna go with the host category, and mine might be a little bit different. I don't know, but I'm going with someone on the first ballot. It was this season, I believe, episode 2. I gotta go with Buck Henry. For me, he was my slam dunk for the host, for just the way his impact was on those initial 5 years. And I'm someone who is very partial to anything that's like the foundation of something. I'm going to give a lot of credit to. And when you think of, there's 2 people in that era who were hosts, and a lot of people get confused and think they were a part of the cast. And obviously that's Steve Martin, number 1, and number 2, it's Buck Henry. And just for a long time, until I think like the 88-89 season, had the most hosting appearances than anyone else. So, I mean, we talk about 5-Timers Club and how big of a deal that is for SNL lore. We got to give it to like the OG of that, and that's, Buck Henry. And even just, it was his suggestion for recurring characters, which is, him telling like to Lauren and all the writers, like that Belushi samurai sketch, we should, guys should do it again. And, just his impact on the show and his impact with influencing the original cast. Buck Henry is my slam dunk for host.
All right, Buck Henry, the first go-to host in SNL history. He hosted twice a year the first 5 seasons of the show. Pretty good and understandable choice. Jamie, how do you feel about Buck Henry?
Yeah, so I did include him as well. I think just really being like first member of the 5-Timers Club for me was like, okay, that's a big credential. Like that really holds a lot of weight, I think. And also just thinking about like when he was hosting, so like he hosted multiple like series or season finales. I feel like for him, like it wasn't just about frequency either. It was really like the role that he played and how people saw him as part of the show, and just really being integral to like the feel that the show had in those early years. So yeah, for me, he was not like the very top of my overall list, but definitely like made the cut for the 15.
All right, Darrin, you're an SNL scholar, I believe. How do you feel about Buck Henry?
Yes. Yeah, I feel very good about Buck Henry. He actually made my list. For a lot of the reasons Deremy said, he's just one of the, key integral hosts that's been there since day one. I mean, the man got hit with the samurai sword mid-sketch and kept on going. I mean, that's dedication. I mean, I don't care what you say. And he's always been there. Some of the characters he played maybe haven't aged as well. That Uncle
Roy, yes.
His name. Uncle Roy, I shouldn't even brought that up. But he's been there for so long, had the longevity. For me, he definitely.
All right, Buck Henry on 3 ballots so far. Victoria, are we making it 4 for 4?
We sure are. He is part of the foundation of this show. And as Jamie mentioned as well, the first 5-timer, I mean, he's a 10-timer at least. So, I mean, he's iconic. He's a legend. And, you know, if you're an SNL nerd, you know who he is. So, I feel like that's a no-brainer.
So I guess going into voting and the reveal of the SNL Hall of Fame this season, got to be feeling good about Buck Henry's chances from how it sounds. So Jamie, Burwood, I want to go to you now, and who would you like to talk about from your ballot?
Yeah, so I'm going to move it into the writing category, because this is one where I was really disappointed they didn't get in the first time, was even more disappointed they didn't get in the second time. So really going to try to work on the pitch for this one, and this is The Lonely Island. So for me, I just feel like thinking about the impact that they had on the show in taking it to the next era was just so huge. And I feel like sometimes isn't something we recognize enough, just really the way that they made SNL comedy viral friendly in a way that allowed the show to evolve. And that I honestly think played a big part in the fact that we're still here today. The show made the changes with the times into this more kind of like snippet, viral friendly world. I just think about the era with them and the role that they played in like defining the tone of the show. I could go on, but I will stop there. Super passionate about this one in terms of just the role that they played in their era.
So I have cut the most passionate professional wrestling promos on why The Lonely Island should be in the SNL Hall of Fame, and that the fact that they're not, it's a really, I think out of anybody who's not in the SNL Hall of Fame, who has been on the ballot before, I think I'm most passionate about The Lonely Island. So it's just kind of ridiculous to me that they're not in. So does anybody agree with me, want to take up that mantle, take up that cause? Darrin, yes? What do you think?
Yeah, I will take that cause up with you, sir. I had them on my list as well, just because basically a lot of the reasons Jamie said, just the way they were able to sort of bring in SNL to like the new era is like really pretty unprecedented. Because I mean, yes, SNL has had short films on the show before, like the Albert Brooks stuff, the Tom Schiller, short films and whatnot. But I think the thing that separates Lonely Island from them is they were coming up around the same time YouTube was becoming big, and like people were getting into that. And so like it was like the sort of perfect marriage where they were coming up with these, weird little videos and also the music videos too. And like YouTube sort of helped, elevate them and usher SNL into like a whole new era. And also like the songs that they came out with were really
they were
really
jams,
good.
Weren't they?
Like I'm on a boat, jizz in my pants. Yeah, Dick in a Box. I think won a Grammy, or at least was like nominated. I'm pretty sure it won. I know it was definitely nominated. And it was like the impact they left. You can still see it in the show today. Like after they left, they were still trying to do those catching music videos with Pete and Chris Redd. And like even now with Please Don't Destroy, people still they get compared to Lonely Island. From time to time. So yeah, Lonely Island, they definitely left like a legacy behind when they left. I mean, just that Incredibad album, I still think is fantastic. It is full of bangers.
Classic, classic after
Lonely
classic.
Island,
Deremy, what do you
Thumbs
have
up.
to say about The Lonely Island?
I've done it before. I'll do it again. I think I stand alone on the fact that they are not on my list.
Oh no!
I'm sorry to disappoint.
So the person I was yelling at in the past was you.
It was.
Boy. All right.
It was. And the thing is, it's someone's got to get cut. That's the thing. So I'm not here to say that they're not worthy of the Hall of Fame because everyone made great points. I just look at everyone else on the list. I want to give props to those of past generations because I feel like the younger audience will forget them, and I want to give them their props. And I just also, to what Jamie said earlier, there's some people on here who have hit like cross-generational as far as either a cast member or a writer or host, and I want to give them their love. So I think The Lonely Island, if they don't make it this year, I definitely probably can see me voting for them on the next ballot, but they were a tough one, but they did not make my top 15.
Victoria, are you going to agree with Deremy, or are you on the correct side of this?
I'm shook. Agree with Deremy in that we should give those who've given SNL its name and the reason why it's here today, because it's a strong foundation. It's set the tone for other, comedic ventures. But The Lonely Island, Emmy Award winners, Grammy nominated, for sure deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I don't want to say they're ahead of their time, but I guess they've helped SNL stay on course and be with the times and not be so old school and, push forward a new way of thinking. And I think Darrin mentioned it too of, those music videos with Pete Davidson and Chris Redd and now Please Don't Destroy. I mean, we wouldn't have those, quite frankly, if it wasn't for The Lonely Island. And I'm a mother lover, you're a mother lover, we can love you. You know what I mean? Catchy, like, what was it called? I'm on a Boat is so iconic too. I mean, I don't feel like that's really an argument. Thomas, do you I feel like that's just like also a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, here in the SNL Hall of Fame, we respect everybody's opinion, and it's all valid. But
diversity.
I should point out that in order to get into the SNL Hall of Fame, the nominee needs 66.7% of the vote. Lonely Island had about 62 last cycle. I think they're going to get in this year. That's just my prediction. And judging by, they got 75% here unofficially, including myself, they got 80%. So I kind of have a feeling Lonely Island.
I'll say this: if they get in, I'm not going to be like, what? Like, I'll be for it.
Okay.
I'm not like anti.
Recount.
There's just
no.
Yeah, I won't do that. There's some other names on here who I might do that for, but not Lonely Island. I'm down if they get in.
Listen, all it takes is one tweet.
Oh, man. Victoria's trying to utilize, she's trying to weaponize Twitter. Okay.
She really is.
Jeez, Victoria. So I actually want to go back to you, Victoria. Who do you want to talk about next on your list?
I have 0 followers. It's funny. Man. I want to say Paula Pell.
Paula Pell in the writer category.
Yeah. I mean, her tenure there was long, I think, from 1995 to 2013. That's almost 20 years. Is that right? Am I mathing correctly? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I graduated from the College of Communication where minimal math was required for a reason. But no, I mean, the Spartan Cheerleaders, Debbie Downer, the Omeleteville, Justin Timberlake character. I mean, she's put up such great characters that are standout in SNL history. I mean, it would be hard for me to not include her on my ballot.
And very influential too. Jamie, you have Paula Pell?
I did, yeah. I just listened to this podcast episode the other day and was already convinced, but it really put me over the edge. I think I talk a lot about her era in SNL just because I love that era, and I feel like I maybe don't give enough credit sometimes to the writing beyond that era. And I think she was such a critical writing force of that time. And I definitely have a sweet spot, I think, for writers that do a great job of creating characters. And like Victoria said, she really shone in that way. I also just think she's a wonderful person. And so she gets the wonderful person bonus point. But just impact alone for that era from the writing side, I did include her in my ballot.
Yeah, she had her thumbprints on a lot of things that we don't even realize. Definitely. It was interesting to go back and research. Darrin, how do you feel? Do you have Paula Pell?
Look, I have her on. I wrote her down as one of the writers, but I didn't ultimately choose her just because I think the writer's category is like a really stacked deck. And, you know, while I do appreciate Paula Pell, I love Girls 5 Eva. I love it all. But I didn't quite choose it just because, I don't know, I felt there were maybe a few that were a little bit more stronger. But yeah, I mean, Paula Pell's fantastic. She's like, you know, sometimes I do feel like she kind of has gone unsung in a lot of ways and needs, you know, a lot more love than she got on the show, or or whatever.
Yeah.
But
and this one is tough. If you had to make that cut,
I had to make some tough cuts,
definitely
man.
tough, and we don't have to walk on eggshells. This is a safe space. We can bellow it out with confidence. We didn't. If you didn't vote for Paula Pell, then that's perfectly fine. I think with writers in general, sometimes it's hard to know what they wrote and what they didn't, especially in the late 90s to mid 2000s that she was involved in. So I'm always curious to see how writers are going to do here, but definitely fair enough, Darrin. Deremy, how about you?
Absolutely, yes. Paula Pell makes my list. For what everyone else said, the sketches that are so iconic from Cheerleaders, Debbie Downer, like that was like, all of us love SNL, but everyone had to watch those Debbie Downer sketches. Her work in association with Kristen Wiig, and she was really a big part of her popular sketches as well. And also in that rise in those like 2000s when Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and Maya and Kristen kind of really, put women on the forefront of SNL for like really the first time, like really taking over and not making it a boys club. And I feel like Paula Pell was a big part behind the scenes in making that happen. So for me, the way you guys talked about Lonely Island, I think it's a crime that she's on the second ballot. So Paula Pell's a definite one for me.
Yeah, Paula Pell, SNL was much better off having her voice on the writing staff. Absolutely. So Darrin, you have Paul Simon, Buck Henry, and The Lonely Island so far. So who's another person on your ballot you would like to bring up?
Well, let's bring up the person I talked to you about on the last time I was here, Dana Carvey. I think it's a no-brainer. I think he's one of those people who maybe people kind of forgot about how impactful he was in his day, just because like he's still around now and he's still, he's on late night shows and he has his podcast. But like you have to remember, like when he was on the show, how hard he hit and how much he just elevated every scene and elevated the show. Like his very first episode, he came out with the chopping broccoli sketch, which was like something he done in stand up. And I think, like I mentioned the last time I was on a podcast, like a cast member is lucky if they have one memorable recurring character that they can go to with a catchphrase. And Dana Carvey had multiple recurring characters with multiple, catchphrases. He had he was the church lady, he was Hans and Franz, he was, Garth, Wayne and Garth. He had the Johnny Carson impression. He was the George W. Bush. He had like all these impressions, all these characters. He was just like knocking it out the park, like every episode. And he was just like really beloved, and everybody really liked him. And he was just like a great performer. And I don't know, like Dana Carvey, like in his prime, he was
a force. And I have a feeling that we're going to have a clean sweep here, but I don't know. Somebody might surprise me. Let's see, Victoria. What say you?
What say me? Of course. Of course. Dana Carvey. I mean, it was just mentioned Hans and Franz, church lady. I mean, but more than that, going to Deremy's point, and I, even though I have some recent folks on here, I do pay homage later in my ballot to those who came before us, especially women. But Dana Carvey is someone who, without him, there is none of these recent folks either. So, we keep standing on the shoulders of those before us, and he is a shoulder of muscle. I don't know if that's a real phrase, but he's a shoulder of muscle. He's like his, and then Wayne's World, and then all his other stuff afterward is killer. I feel like that one is also an obvious one. I'm kind of confused as to why he's not in there already, but we will discuss.
Well, he's not in there because this is his first time on the ballot. See, at the SNL Hall of Fame, we kind of like to space it out a little bit. So this was just his first time on the ballot. So that's an easy reason. It was no slight against Dana.
Okay. I'll tell Twitter to back off.
Yeah, tell him to back off. Thank you. Jamie Burwood, are you a fan of Dana Carvey?
Yeah, definitely. I think just when you think about like performers that are just so associated with their era on SNL, everyone's already touched on just characters. I think Church Lady, like in the conversation for just one of the top tier all-time characters. Impressions, I feel like people will still play the like George H.W. clips, and it just has that lasting impact. So yeah, for me, I don't think there is I don't know. I'd be curious to hear an argument to not include him, but for me, I think it's a no-brainer. Agreed.
Deremy Dove 4 for 4.
Absolutely. That was for for the four that we had to have. Dana was my cast member. For me, I look at it like on my episode when I was on with you, Thomas, I talked about Dick Ebersol and that Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo. That's the first cast that saved the show from like being done. The second was with Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman, Kevin Nealon, and all those. And honestly, for me, if I see a greatest SNL list and Dana Carvey isn't in the top 10, that's when I'm just like throwing an outrage. I'm throwing papers. I'm going, what the heck is this? Dana Carvey to me is a top 10 SNL cast member, so it's a no-brainer. Dana Carvey.
Yeah, I think Dana's going to be, I'll go out on a limb and say he's going to be a lock. I think he's going to get voted in here on his first try. And with him, to me, it's not just, is he an SNL Hall of Famer? It's, is he on the Mount Rushmore of SNL cast members? And I think that's the conversation that Dana is in. Deremy, who's next on your list?
For me, this person was the writer lock. So the other three are all mentioned for my locks. Paul Simon, Dana Carvey. I mentioned Buck Henry. I'm going for that writer, Robert Smigel, who was brought up. He's on his first time on the ballot. And just so many of the iconic sketches that he was a part of, from TV Funhouse to the that finale for the 85-86 season with the John Lovitz, and Billy Martin and Lauren, like they're burning up like that cast and who will survive, and that's pretty gutsy for like that was Smigel's first season, and for him to kind of write that sketch, the iconic Not Gonna Phone It In Tonight, that cold open with Steve Martin that everyone still talks about to this day, the Bear sketch. There's just so many things that Robert Smigel has an impact on, and from that initial run in the 80s into the mid 90s, and then he's come back and done so many things. Robert Smigel to me is also, like, as far as a writer, a slam dunk Hall of Famer. And as far as writers, like, kind of like what you said, Thomas, it's not if he's going to be a Hall of Famer, is he on that pantheon of Mount Rushmore of greatest SNL writers. So for me, Robert Smigel is easy.
Yeah, Darrin, what do you think about Robert Smigel?
I think, yes, I had him down as one of my writers, too. He's like one of those writers who's just really defined his era of SNL. Like Deremy said, like with the TV Funhouse, a lot of those, if you go back and watch some of those TV Fun, a lot of them are, he's really pushing the envelope in a lot of those.
Yeah.
Like, the Fun with Real Audio, especially there was that one, I think Sex in the Country, which is, Jesus. I mean, wow.
All right, Victoria?
Well, now that you say that, no, I completely agree with everything Deremy said. I wouldn't change anything about what Deremy said, but my only thing is he did not make the ballot this time around. I'm really sorry to say, it's just his work is phenomenal. It just didn't have that much of an impact on me. That's all. Nothing against him. If I had 16, he'd be on there. But they only gave me 15. Sorry, Robert.
So you're passing the buck. You're blaming me and Jamie, Jamie Dew for our oppressive rules for voting.
Yeah.
All right, I got it. I'll say this about Robert Smigel, and Bill Kenny and I had a good conversation about it. I think if you only looked at his sketch writing, he might be an SNL Hall of Famer. And if you only looked at TV Funhouse on its own, he might be an SNL Hall of Famer. But combined, it's a pretty big argument. Just the totality of it all, I think. So he would get my vote.
Schmidt's gay.
Schmidt's gay is one of the iconic ad parodies of the early 90s. Yeah, so Robert was just behind so much, and I think at some point he may get in, and it'll be very well deserved. So I want to go to Jamie Burwood, find out who's next on your list.
All right. So staying with the cast, had to go with Amy. This was tip top of my list. Just no question on this one for me. Definitely like top 3 across my ballot overall. I think just looking at how she was like promoted so quickly from featured player to full cast member, just thinking about, I think the versatility for her is what really stands out. Just thinking about Weekend Update impact, characters, impressions, like the political bits, like just every little piece she touched upon. And I think when people think about that era of the early 2000s, like you can't talk about that era without talking about Amy. So for me, she was a definite check plus.
And Victoria, Franso, you were my guest on the Amy Poehler episode in this season. Do I even have to ask?
You don't. You absolutely don't. But Jamie just said it. She was the first woman to be promoted within her first season at Saturday Night Live as someone who's trying to semi-follow in her footsteps of, being in the Chicago comedy scene. I don't think people truly understand what she's done pre-SNL in this realm is such a big deal, and not many people get to experience it. And then, this will explain why she was number 1. I also just wanted to defend my episode. So, it would be silly for me not to have her on my ballot. But if you go to her Wikipedia page and you look at her awards, you have to go to a different Wikipedia page to list all of her awards and noms. So, enough said. She's one of a kind. She's the first of many. And I mentioned this in that episode that I'm standing on her shoulders, and I know that she's standing on others, but for me, she's the one pulling me up to the top. So.
All right. Darrin Patterson, does Amy Poehler get the thumbs up from you?
She does. She was on my list. I don't know how you can not have her on the show. She's, I don't know. She's fantastic. She's phenomenal. Founding member of the UCB, and the episode she's in really shows that she's had strong improv chops from the jump. Her time on Weekend Update, it was memorable both with Tina and with Seth.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. It's she's someone you can make a case kind of it's hard not to even put her in anyone's top 10 of all time kind of list. So Amy Poehler's easy.
Yeah, Amy Poehler, super beloved. I have a feeling we'll be sending her Hall of Fame plaque here in the next few months. Darrin, I'll go back to you. Who's next on your list?
Well, let's go back to host. This host I wrote down. I believe one of you guys we talked about on the episode. Christopher Walken. Let's start talking about Walken. I feel like he's he's pretty much. He's a no-brainer just to get into the Hall of Fame again. He's one of those hosts you wouldn't think would be good in comedic sketches just because he mainly he does drama, and he's a bit of an odd character, but somehow SNL was able to funnel that odd energy he has into all these classic sketches, of course, The Continental, Colonel Angus, and of course the cowbell sketch with the Blue Oyster Cult, one of the most iconic sketches that people are still quoting to this day. I gotta have more cowbell. It is strange, how Christopher Walken, who does have this kind of odd energy, is able to funnel that into comedy to show that he's not, such a kind of weird weirdo, but he's actually pretty funny too, and he's actually has comedic chops.
So in addition to all those points, I feel like just the way that his episodes had this kind of tonal feel to them of you had certain things you look forward to, those opening musical numbers that were just always a little bit zany and fun, and certain recurring characters and sketches that he participated in kind of bringing to the next level. I feel like he was always up for anything. And I think what's really interesting to me about him, and we talked a little bit about this in the podcast, was not only did you see him having an impact on the show, you see the show impacting how people think about him. When you talk to somebody about Christopher Walken, they think of SNL. It's just become so intertwined, his identity and SNL, that I feel like he had to get one of my votes.
So, Deremy, does Christopher Walken's odd energy and personality resonate with you?
It does, but not for my list.
But, okay.
He doesn't make my list. But like I'm a big fan of Christopher Walken, and everyone has made great points and, you know, got nothing but love for everybody. But I will say this, and I believe, Thomas, we spoke about this like back when I was on the show with you, like off air, and I might get some heat for it, but if you take away, in the cowbell sketch is iconic, top 5 sketch of all time. If you take that away, I don't think Christopher Walken is making the impact with everyone, in my opinion, like the way everyone else is saying. So I feel like there's moments that can be Hall of Fame worthy. You know, there's those like in sports, Hall of Fame type of games, Hall of Fame type of contributors in other ways. But I feel like that sketch is how Christopher Walken, in my opinion, should be in the Hall of Fame. He's a part of a Hall of Fame sketch, a Mount Rushmore sketch. But you take that away, are people really talking about Christopher Walken on SNL? Like, is he hitting it that same way? I personally don't think so. So Christopher Walken, I can see him getting in the future on my ballot, but for right now, it's a tough one, but no.
Victoria, what do you think?
I agree with Deremy here. Outside of Cowbell and maybe Colonel Angus, which is like just recently came atop of mind, I can't really name anything else. I mean, and Cowbell itself, I think the star of that was Will Ferrell, so he wasn't even a focal point really in that for me. So, I mean, not to say he's not talented, not to say he's not iconic, but I think when it comes to, I think he deserves to be in a Hall of Fame, like an actor or comedy Hall of Fame, but
the
just
oddball Hall of Fame,
right? But just for me, it wouldn't be the Saturday Night Live Hall of Fame. And if you're listening to this, Christopher Walken, and I know that you are, don't kill me. All it takes is one tweet.
All right, Victoria, who are you going to be tweeting about next? Who's on your list?
This is hard. I took someone else out, and as we were talking, and I replaced this person with them. I won't say it because I feel like this person's going to be mentioned by someone else, but a writer, and I think someone who deserves their flowers, at least from NBC, the one and only Conan O'Brien. Conan O'Brien is undoubtedly funny. He's made such an impact on Saturday Night Live, and I feel like he's, I think he's earned it and how much work he's put in. And, we all know Conan O'Brien. I think he's a staple in the comedy world, let alone Saturday Night Live. And his career wouldn't be where it is today without Saturday Night Live. So that's why I've added him in.
All right. Team Coco. Victoria is Team Coco. Does anybody else have Conan on their list? And if not, why not? I actually want to go to Darrin. What do you think about Conan O'Brien?
Hey, look, I love Coco. I love Mr. O'Brien. I came very close to having him on my list. Very close. He's, of course, in I think the 80s era of SNL is the era I grew up with, right? That's why I really have an affinity for it. And so to see like Conan O'Brien in that era where he was with other writers like, Bob Odenkirk and Schmeigel, like that really endeared me to him. Of course, he was a fantastic writer with The Simpsons. He was in the very first Five Timers Club sketch, of course.
It was a very easy no for me because I definitely respect Conan as the performer and the late night host and what he's become. But I feel on the show, he was a part of a group of writers that like emerged, but there's not a lot of sketches that were like, that's a Conan sketch. I believe even on like the Fly on the Wall podcast with Carvey and Spade, Schmeigel went on and said that the Girl Watcher that Lovitz and Hanks did, that was mostly a Conan like written sketch, which a lot of people gave to Schmeigel, including myself, that Schmeigel only helped out with. But I think Conan, because of who he became, we know him. I think of him writing-wise more for what he did on The Simpsons than what he did on SNL. So for me, Conan, not on the list.
Jamie, do you have anything to say about Conan?
Yeah, he did not make my list, unfortunately, either. I feel like I was being pulled a little bit by the fact that he's like a great entertainer and human, but then I got checked and was like, if I didn't think of him from other things, would he still make my list? And when I applied that check, he didn't. So
I think that's fair. Well, we've just caused Victoria to mobilize the Beehive and Team Coco, so I think we're all in for it.
I hope you're all
Deremy,
sweating.
Yeah, Deremy. I want to know who's next on your list.
For me, I got to go with a guy who I probably would not put him on my top 10 greatest cast members anymore, but he's definitely on top 10 most important, and that's John Belushi. To me, one of the people to establish what SNL was, not just because he was there and on the show, but just that kind of rebellious, kind of anti-establishment, counterculture feel that SNL had for so long. And now it is the establishment now. But to kind of give it where like SNL had that cool feeling, I think John Belushi was the first one to really get that. I mean, the sketches from the Blues Brothers to, with the Samurai, just so many things on there are just iconic. And for someone like him, who at one point was on the number one, late night show, had a number one album with the Blues Brothers and the number one movie with Animal House all at one point, kind of really, you can say Chevy Chase, but I feel like the blueprint for that SNL star to get into movies and everything, I look at John Belushi as he's that first one to kind of be like, oh, from SNL stardom to movie stardom, that was him. And he kind of paved the way for, you saw what Bill Murray did and Eddie Murphy and Sandler and all these other guys. So John Belushi, I like I said, I would got to put him as top 10 most important cast members. He's a no-brainer.
Yeah, Jamie, is he a no-brainer for you?
Yeah, he was. And this is where, I feel like I sometimes have to separate, personal preference and historical impact. And I think, personal preference aside, and I mean, no disrespect, amazing comedian, but legacy on the show, I think a lot of folks would really have him in the conversation for top 10, some might even say top 5, just impactful cast members. So, yeah, he definitely made my list.
Yeah, Darrin?
Yeah, absolutely. He made my list too. I mean, he was the first cast member in the first cold open of the show ever. Yeah, and a lot of things that Deremy and Jamie already hinted to, like his impact on the show, the energy he brought that sort of rebellious wild card, factor to the show that really resonated with the young audience at the time, all the college kids and whatever. And he just was embodied that, just like the crazy, party guy and just doing cartwheels. I mean, just his impact and his energy was just so momentous. It affected future cast members too. Like Chris Farley is, said on record numerous times, I modeled my whole life after John Belushi.
The trace of him is throughout comedy for forever. And I mean, in Rolling Stone, and I have the magazine, he's the cover, and Rolling Stone in February 2015 did a ranking of, I think, all 141 SNL cast members at that time. Of course, that was 8 years ago. And he was number 1. And I think it just speaks to him, and it speaks to his comedy. And, he's a legend. He's one of the GOATs, as the kids say these days. And I'll say he's like the Michael Jordan of SNL cast members.
Yeah, and I think he's gonna find himself in the SNL Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. He's another one of those. When we set up the season and looked at the ballot, that is pretty sure was going to make it. So this is almost just confirmation of that. I'm going to go over to Jamie and find out who's next on your list.
Yeah, so let's maybe talk about Dick Ebersol. I don't want to steal your thunder, Deremy. Just listen to your podcast on this one as well. And I think just when we're talking about impact on the show and thinking about multiple touch points where he had a pivotal role, that was what really pushed this over the edge for me. So I think thinking about that initial role in helping to create the show and the role he played with Lorne, but then also thinking about his role in arguably the biggest save of the show. And I think a lot of times we'll throw around the phrase SNL wouldn't be what it is without XYZ person. But I think in this case, it's actually pretty true. So that to me pushed me over the edge on this one. It's a little bit of a non-traditional, like getting outside the cast host world, but I did end up including him in my ballot.
Yeah, Dick Ebersol, super interesting to me. I'm going to clear the seas for you now, Deremy. Tell us what you want to about Dick Ebersol.
Jamie, you are amazing. This is so cool. I thought I'd be up here by myself, and you've made my week. Thank you, Jamie. Dick Ebersol, the man who helped to co-create Saturday Night Live. He picked Lorne Michaels. We all can agree the most important person in SNL history to run the show. It was a big part in forming it. Then when Lorne leaves and Jean Domanian almost threw it down the toilet and they fire her, they bring in Ebersol. And by box office numbers, and I think it's hard to really argue it, the biggest star to come from the show was Eddie Murphy. And who's the one? Now, Eddie was hired reluctantly by Jean Domanian. Who put him in that star seat that saved the show? That was Dick Ebersol. And I mean, those two things right there, I got to give love for. But then you can also look at that Steinbrenner year where you have Billy Crystal and Chris Guest and, Martin Short and those iconic sketches that came from one year. That's also Dick Ebersol. So right on, Jamie. Dick Ebersol, slam dunk for me.
Yes, Deremy, thank you so much. And you were a great guest on that show. And Dick Ebersol, just a fascinating candidate to me. Victoria, I'm curious to know your thoughts. How much did you give Dick Ebersol much consideration?
Yeah. Jamie and Deremy said it. It is what it is. SNL, like, as Jamie said, it would literally not be here if it wasn't for him. So giving him his flowers.
Yes, Dick Ebersol. All right. Darrin, are we going to make me and Deremy and all the Dick Ebersol fans happy out there?
Yeah, let's do it. Just because I know for some reason, like a lot of purists, I guess, only consider the Lorne Michael years of SNL like the true SNL. And also, with the exception of, like I said, the Eddie Murphy episode, no one really talks about the Ebersol years that much. But I got to go back and watch them again. But I do remember there being a lot of solid shows and a lot of solid performers and sketches happening in those years, and they don't really kind of get talked about that much. It's one of those things where people are surprised when they hear that Julia Louis-Dreyfus was on SNL. They're like, oh, really? I don't know.
Darrin, I want to stay with you. Let us know who's next on your list.
Next on my list, who should we go to? All right. Well, okay. We gotta. Bill Murray. We gotta have Bill Murray in the SNL Hall of Fame. What are we doing here? The guy came in, replaced Chevy Chase after Chevy left after season 1, and pretty much did a better job at Chevy Chase's job than Chevy did. He came out with Nick the Loud Singer and did the Nerds with Gilda, and he just kind of brought in this really kind of loosey-goosey, laid-back energy to the show that people really loved and vibed with. People find him endearing and really enjoy working with him on the show. I would say, and also he's just gone on to be this really great actor and have this really great career.
Deremy, how do you feel about Bill Murray?
Another slam dunk. Yeah. Saturday Night Live was a hit show. Chevy was the first breakout star, and him coming on during the second season, and even that sketch that kind of made him get established, which is, I'm not doing well on the show, I need your help. And just even watching that clip all the time with, some people call me Billy. Around here I get called the new guy. It's just a great way to kind of which I think you would see now is not that, but back in, 76, 77, that was a different way of kind of breaking the zeitgeist and saying I know you guys aren't really looking at me as the audience, you're thinking of Chevy, but I'm here too. So, kind of like what Darrin said, he's just synonymous. He wasn't on the first season, but a lot of times people associate him with the first year because he just made such an impact in the next 4. So Bill Murray is an easy one.
Yeah, he's a de facto original, not ready for primetime player, honestly, in most people's eyes. Jamie, is Bill Murray on your ballot?
Yeah, absolutely. I was curious to see how long we would get into this before his name came up. So I'm glad it finally has. I think everyone's kind of covered it really well. But just, I have mad respect for anyone who's put in that kind of like tough position, and keeping in mind how early in the show's era it was. In this day and age, we're used to cast coming in and out, but for him to kind of be in that role in the second season of having to replace somebody so great, and just how he stepped up and is now in conversations of, again, among the all-time greats. So respect to him on that.
Yeah, Victoria, we got a Chicago boy here. Does he get your vote?
Yeah. Yes, he is the blueprint for all of us. And I'm not going to add anything new to it, except he is partially why I am here today. And also my brother would kill me if I did not have him on my ballot as a born and raised Chicago boy himself.
Bill Murray, clean sweep on everybody's ballots here. Victoria, I want to stay with you. Who's next on your list?
Oh, man. Okay. Is everyone ready?
Let's do it.
Jane Curtin. I saw a face. For those of you who can't see, I saw a face. Jane Curtin for me is, one of the first. This is, I would say, more so personal preference versus historical input, or first woman to do Weekend Update and really, again, open the door for the Amy Poehlers to be Amy Poehler, for the the Tina Feys to be Tina Fey, and her, and of course Gilda. But yeah, I think she's iconic from those earlier days.
So who made the face when Victoria said Jane Curtin?
Mr. Darrin.
Was that was Darrin, right? And Jane Curtin, the spirit of Jane Curtin, we're about to do point counterpoint. So go ahead, Darrin.
I'm not going to say the line. I was thinking about it. I'm not. No, I mean, I made the face just because, like, Jane Curtin was very close to being on my list, but I didn't put her on my list just because with all the other cast members I have, like, it's a stacked deck. But, like, I will admit, like, all the points, Victoria, you made are totally valid. I love Jane Curtin. I think she's one of those underrated cast members. Definitely, like, just because like when she was on the cast, she's like one of those like utility players that's just very good and very solid, very professional and good at what they do, but they're not like really in the spotlight maybe that much. Like in the first season, you could see like Belushi was like the rock star, and Gilda Radner was the rock star. Like everybody really loved them and gravitated towards them. But Jane was like sort of still doing her thing, but she wasn't maybe getting the shine that I think she should have. But like she's like really, really solid as a Weekend Update anchor. She was really good in those Irwin Mainway sketches she did with Dan Aykroyd. Yeah. Where like Dan Aykroyd has like the more showier role, where you're like, hey, what the back glass? What's the problem? But like she was able to like be more like still that more grounded type of person, so that Dan Aykroyd could be more like free flowing and more funny, I guess.
Thinking of her and playing kind of more of the like straight woman or utility or that kind of role, it was hard for me to compare against some of the like bigger characters, bigger folks. But that isn't to say that her role in the show wasn't huge. And I think she is absolutely worthy of the Hall of Fame. We'll absolutely have her in consideration, but I was not able to include her in my final 15.
And Deremy, does Jane Curtin get your vote?
Victoria, I got your back. Jane Curtin does make my final 15.
About time.
I got your back. I'll also say this quick side note to our host, Thomas. That was my favorite episode of season 3, the Jane Curtin episode. Wow. Really enjoyed it.
It was me and Andrew Dick.
Yeah, you guys did a great job.
Did that episode.
Great job. Yeah. So I love that episode. Thank you. And I believe we have to look at what she did with Weekend Update and how iconic and memorable that exchange was with Dan Aykroyd, her role in Coneheads, and for the stories of SNL off the air and how chaotic it was in the party scene and, all that. That's legendary. But for all the writers, everyone knew that the one constant, the person that they could depend on in the cast was Jane. And I am someone who believes that we give a lot of credit, and rightfully so, to the male utility players, the male glues, Dan Aykroyd, Phil Hartman, and I love them. But we don't give that love to the women who are the glue. And Jane Curtin was we kept talking about how Dan Aykroyd kind of was that utility guy, the original cast. Well, you had two. You had Dan Aykroyd and you had Jane Curtin. And I'm also someone who believes just because of the institution that this is, I think that all cast members of that first season should be Hall of Famers just because that's the first cast. So Jane Curtin's also a part of that. I can understand why people do overlook her, but it's someone that I like. That's why I love history, to talk about those who are overlooked but shouldn't be, should get their flowers. So Jane Curtin made my list.
All right, Jane Curtin on 2 out of 4 ballots here on this show. Deremy, I want to stick with you. Who's next on your list?
Well, going to the female cast member who's a utility player, I'm going to go with Maya Rudolph. To me, it's a shame. I don't know how she's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. She's someone who I, personally and just objectively put in my top 10 SNL cast members of all time because of her versatility and what she could do and the different characters she played and the way she just kind of fit in any mold. She, to me, is for like 21st century SNL performers, is the model for that glue utility person. And I think look at the SNL 40 even, right? So everyone's back, all these stars. And one of the funniest bits was her and Martin Short and her as Beyonce and the whole musical numbers. I mean, to me, even at SNL 40, you had to use her and give her that props. Who else could nail that? And I mean, that part of the sketch where, she's singing as Beyonce and Martin Short is, the wind's blowing and he's almost like getting blown off the screen. I mean, that right there to me just is huge. And also what she did, she's up there. We mentioned Amy Poehler and Tina Fey and Kristen Wiig as far as, really elevating women on SNL and getting rid of that frat boy culture. But we leave out that fourth person a lot in Maya Rudolph. So Maya's on my top 15.
All right, Maya Rudolph. So I saw double fist pumps coming from Victoria. So I'll go to you next. But good thing, yes, you love Maya Rudolph.
I adore Maya Rudolph. I mean, she is up there. I feel like I'm repeating myself with, why I love certain folks, but that's what I look for in this Hall of Fame. I mean, iconic because she's a woman of color who, very seldom on that show. I'm glad to see that we're getting more, especially Black women on the show to do something. But like, for me, she was so versatile. She's broken barriers. I mean, and, she's also Minnie Riperton's mom, or daughter. So it's like, what am I going to do? Say no to her? No, I mean, and she's part of that iconic legacy of women who, again, this is more recent, and I don't want to discredit, the Janes and the Gildas and whatnot, but like her, Kristen Wiig, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, really, at least for me, like those Gilda and Jane opened the door, and Maya, among the others, ran through that door, and they kicked other doors down that were further down the building, if that makes any sense at all. I'm trying to give visuals here. They, Gilda and Jane and those in that generation, they opened the door to the vestibule, but then Amy, Maya, Tina, Kristen broke down, the door inside the buildings, and we got to roam free, and now there's glass ceilings being shattered by the women who follow them. I mean, Maya Rudolph is also my president, so there's that as well.
Yes, yeah, she's great. I love when she pops up in things too. She's my judge from The Good Place.
Yes.
Just from so many other things. Yeah, Maya Rudolph. So Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, got to include her. I think just from a trailblazing standpoint, I think just like being this amazing, larger than life comedic persona anytime she is on the screen. I think can't understate her role in that era. Plus 1,000 to everything everyone said. She's terrific.
Oh no.
I was so close to, like, it was one of those things where, oh god, it was one of the things, like, it was very close. I don't know. Okay. All those things you said are correct. I love Maya Rudolph. I think she's fantastic. From the first time she came, I think I remember seeing her for the first time when she was doing her Christina Aguilera impression, and she was like hitting those Christina Aguilera notes to show like, oh, she can sing too. And like, it's like you said, like she was on the show at a time where she was the only woman of color, so they'd have to have her play Oprah and Michelle Obama, and like I was super close to putting her on, but I put somebody else on my list, but I still think maybe
sounds tentative. It's maybe up in the air. Okay.
Yeah, like I have somebody else in the list, but like it could switch at any moment. So
okay.
I don't know how you would.
You still got time.
If I start crying,
oh no.
No.
Tears maybe.
Well,
maybe.
Well, I want to thank Darrin because for the longest time, my Lonely Island omission was like the worst one. But I think you taught me, my friend. So
this is controversial.
Thank you for leaving Maya off, because now I don't look like the worst one on here by not having the Lonely Island. So thank you, Darrin. I appreciate you, brother.
You're welcome, Darrin.
All right, I want to go to Jamie. So Jamie, who's next on your list?
Well, I got to talk about my girl, Molly Shannon. So Molly Shannon has been nominated for a couple of rounds now. Her percentage has been growing. As I was looking back at the data, I think she got up to 47-ish%. So she's getting there. Needs a little more to get over the hump. So my spiel on Molly Shannon kind of goes back to, I think, some of the things that we've talked about in the past in terms of just like impact on the era of the show. And we talked about kind of the Bad Boys era and kind of knowing that the door was blown wide open with Tina and Amy and Maya and others. I would argue that there was a step in the middle there in that late 90s era with Molly and a few others coming in and really making the women of SNL water cooler discussion again. And just thinking about the fearlessness with which she approached her character comedy, just that shift in tone of SNL that I think her and Will and a few others really led the charge behind. I really credit her and Will and a few others with playing a huge role in saving the show in that time and just really making the conversation a bit different, where people were saying like, wow, these women are just as funny or maybe even more so than some of the men, and really just evolving that conversation. So that's my spiel. I'm very curious to see how the votes on this one lie. I was pleasantly surprised last time that there were quite a few others, but I also know votes are running low, so I'm a little bit nervous on this one.
Yeah, so Darrin, you were a maybe on Maya Rudolph. Can we put you down for a Molly Shannon?
All right, look. I would... I don't know why you would demean that.
Because chaos, that's why.
Why are you doing this, Thomas? What's it all for? All right, so I'll admit, like, Molly Shannon, like you said, Jamie, like, she's definitely should be in the Hall of Fame. Like, she does so amazing things. And she was on the show, like, back when there were a ton of really physical, like, it seemed like physical comedy was, like, the big thing when she was on. Because, like, Sherry O'Terry was super physical. Chris Kattan, super physical. Even Will Ferrell got really, like, physical. And Molly was, like, just as physical, if not more so than all of them. Like, when she would play, Courtney Love or, of course, Mary Catherine Gallagher, where she, like, flung herself onto a stack of metal chairs. Like, I remember watching that. I was like, oh, my God, is she hurt? Is she okay? But, yeah, and, like, to see her now to sort of be this sort of, I guess, elder statesman of SNL and just really being beloved by everybody, and she just kind of just radiates love and light. I really, again,
Don't feel peer pressure.
Feel peer
You don't have to
pressure.
feel
I'll send
peer
you bullet
pressure.
points.
Yeah. Oh God! Nobody tweet at me, please. I have a family. I would put it as a maybe because like she was so close. Because like the person I did put as the cast member for my fifth choice, I'll admit it's a bit of a personal preference, but I think I can make a strong case that that person does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But like
Okay.
Molly Shannon, like just like
Okay, Victoria, what do you think of Molly Shannon?
I think her, Anna Gasteyer, and Sherry O'Terry are incredibly underrated. And I mean, it's just kind of devastating what Darrin just said. No, I'm kidding. I think Molly Shannon is incredibly underrated. We talked about her physical comedy, and you think of Mary Catherine Gallagher, Superstar, and Sally O'Malley. And I think one of the things I thought about when going through this ballot is when you think of SNL and you think of standout characters, right? Those two come to mind. They are on the list. I think of too when you go to like buy. I know this sounds silly, but like when you go to SNL merch, if you're like going on Etsy or even at the NBC shop at 30 Rock, they include her characters often. And so because of her impact on the show and impact on SNL's legacy and the character work that came from her, she is of course on my list. And I think she had a one-of-a-kind personality that is that you don't really see often. And I think during her era of SNL, and I think something us younger millennials don't really truly appreciate is her and then the aforementioned Anna Gasteyer and Sherry O'Terry. Iconic.
Yeah, so Deremy, can we interest you in a Molly Shannon?
Jamie, I'm sorry. You had my back with Dick Ebersol. I'll always appreciate you. You'll always be in my heart, but Molly Shannon did not make my list. She didn't. And I like what Victoria said because we always group the, Kristen, Tina, Amy, and Maya together. We don't group Sherry, Anna Gasteyer, and Molly together. And that's a great point. And I think maybe also that's kind of what hurts Molly for me, where I look at like Sherry O'Terry of those three of like, for me personally, she would be in my Hall of Fame. And, Superstar, that's a great like character, and she was a part of like Sweaty Balls, like that's a great moment too. But she's in that Hall of Very Good for me, but not like the Hall of Fame, like not enough of an impact to get over the hump. But like someone we should give more props to, but not in my Hall of Fame.
Darrin, so you had alluded to the fact that you had maybe an out of the box sort of pick. You want to share that with us?
Like I'll admit this pick for the cast member is I always felt like this cast member didn't get their due, and that's Jan Hooks. Like I feel like she's somebody who like their time on they were on the show for a good while, but I don't think they get talked about as much as they should. I think Jan Hooks was a incredibly strong performer. As something else I know is like she's always does really good work when she was with Phil Hartman. And like I think Phil Hartman is a cast member who everybody agrees is probably one of the best to ever do it on SNL. And I would say that Jan Hooks is like on his level. Like every time they were in a sketch together, she wasn't like falling behind. She was keeping up with him, like even more so than most of the other cast members. Like I would argue that Jan Hooks was probably as good as Phil Hartman, but doesn't get discussed enough. I mean, like she was a person who was like super versatile. She had a few breakout characters like the Sweeney sisters and whatnot, and like she just like a really strong performer who I just don't think gets their due, and that's why I chose her as like the last person. Although like I will agree, of course, Maya Rudolph, fantastic, Molly Shannon, fantastic, but I feel like Jan Hooks, should be in the conversation more.
Yeah, so Jamie, Darrin thinks he might be the only one possibly who has Jan Hooks on his ballot. Do you agree with him?
So she was my number 6. She was on an early list. I feel like I need to include her. And again, like there might be a few borderline people that move up and down the line after we finish this conversation. I think I think if it was a list of like most underrated, absolutely, I would put her on there. And I absolutely will vote for her next time. She's great.
Deremy, what do you think of Jan Hooks?
Darrin, I got your back, man. Jan Hooks is on my list. I got you, man. Just for impact, what her and Nora Dunn did in that time in, the late 80s. I agree with Darrin that was kind of like the way Gilda and like Bill Murray, Jan and Phil Hartman had that chemistry. I know Phil Hartman helped Jan with like, she had a lot of stage fright and a lot of anxiety. And so they kind of had definitely had a close bond. But I mean, just the impressions, from like the Sinead O'Connor to when I still crack up with, I believe it was Dana Carvey who's doing Regis and she's doing Kathy Lee. And just the way they're going back and forth and just going, and she's just nailing it. And it's, taking me back to my childhood of watching, being homesick, and like grandma would have Regis and Kathy Lee on. And I'm like, geez, like, I miss school. So it was like, but like they just nailed it. And the versatility and the way she could nail these impressions was just incredible. And I think that era gets props to me for saving the show. And honestly, if I take out any bias, I think she's part of what could be the greatest cast in SNL history. So I got to give the Jan Hooks. So yeah, she's on my list.
Awesome. Victoria, is she on your list?
She was someone I struggled with. I don't think she doesn't deserve. I think she for sure deserves to be in the SNL Hall of Fame. I just only had so many picks. So I agree with everything said about her. She's iconic, and she did something that not many others could. So, and in a time, well, every time, it's still we're still working on it, but especially then where women weren't looked at as funny, she was, and she pushed that barrier. But unfortunately, this time around, she was not on my list, unfortunately. And if she's in there and if she gets in, everyone votes for her, I'll be thrilled. It's just a matter of only have 15.
Yeah, I would like to point out that, historically, we all know that SNL can often be a bit of a boys' club, especially in the early years, but we've given a lot of props to some really amazing women from SNL. Like we just talked about Jan Hooks, Maya Rudolph, Molly Shannon, Amy Poehler, Jane Curtin. So I just love that we're highlighting these wonderfully talented women across SNL eras. It's just really great. It just speaks to so much amazing talent has been on this show. And regardless of what John Belushi says, women are in fact funny. They're very funny. And we have proof, not like we need proof, but we have just wonderful examples right here. So I want to kick it over to Deremy. Deremy, who's next on your list?
I'm going to go to the host category, and I'm going to someone who I think time has forgotten. But for a long time, for me growing up, we've been mentioning Mount Rushmores here. When you talked about Mount Rushmores of hosts, you had to look at Steve Martin, look at Buck Henry, Alec Baldwin, and John Goodman. And to me, John Goodman is a no-brainer Hall of Famer as a host. Not only that, just thinking of, the way we talked about Buck Henry earlier, as he was that go-to kind of like host, like we got to fill the gap. Like John Goodman did that throughout, like, from the 80s into the 90s. The Clinton Lewinsky scandal, how big that was, and him playing Linda Tripp and just really just nailing it is kind of like an iconic moment from that era in SNL history. And I think just the versatility that he had, and he was kind of like someone who was part of the SNL family. And like I said, Alec Baldwin kind of kept it going for a little while after, but he's in the Five Timers Club, and I think you have to give John Goodman his flowers and put him in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Darrin, John Goodman hosted almost every year in the 90s. He was like a mainstay. Do you think he deserves a spot on your ballot for the SNL Hall of Fame?
Yeah, absolutely. I have him on my list. He was one of those cast members that would just like nail it every time. Just like weave in seamlessly with the cast at every time. Like I believe he actually auditioned for SNL back in the 80s and didn't get it. And it's a shame because like we could have had John Goodman as a cast member because like he's shown time and time again with these hosts of show, he could totally be in the cast. I still remember there was one episode I watched for this other SNL podcast I was on where we watched. It was one of the ones where he hosted in the '80s, and he was on the anal retentive chef sketch with Phil Hartman, but he played like this Cajun chef, and like of course he's like a big messy Cajun chef, and anal retentive chef is like, hey, can we make this all neat? And like I don't know, like the chemistry between him and Phil was fantastic. He's always been one of those guys that just like when you see John Goodman, you're in for a good time. So yeah, absolutely, Hall of Fame John Goodman.
Yeah, what do you think, Victoria?
This is another one where I do think he should be in the Hall of Fame, just not on my ballot this time. I mean, he auditioned along with, I think it was Jim Carrey, or during that era. Oh, who's that producer? Gene something.
Gene Domanian.
Yes. During that time, I think, and Jim Carrey was rejected as well. It just goes to show that Gene, come on. What you doing? What you doing, Gene? No, John Goodman is without a doubt awesome, and he should be in the Hall of Fame. He's just not on my ballot this time.
Jamie, do you agree with Victoria, or does John Goodman have your vote like he has Deremy and
Yeah,
Darren's?
he does have my vote. I think when I was looking at the hosting list this time around, he was the first one that I had to put on there. I think even above Christopher Walken for me, just in terms of like iconic SNL hosts, stand the test of time. They have those character moments, the Linda Tripp, like all of these things that just you can picture immediately, like the Linda Tripp phone call moment, like just these things that come to mind. And I think when people think SNL in that era and an iconic host, like you have to talk about John Goodman.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just by sheer numbers alone, I think he's going to get top consideration amongst voters. So, Jamie, I want to stick with you. Tell us who's next on your list.
Yeah, let me see who we haven't talked about yet. I think we've gone through all the cast pieces. I do have one more on the writing side. So I did put James Downey on my list. And again, the writing category was just so stacked that I feel like in a lot of cases you're comparing apples and oranges. And is the apple better from this era or the orange better from this era? It's really tough, right? But I think for me, what pushed him over the edge was, again, I'm a sucker for like the longevity and the impact over multiple eras. So writing from like having his impact start in the 70s all the way into like the 2010s, serving as head writer for so many seasons. So again, just like the amount of impact in that sense. I think just hearing how other people talk about him, how cast members talk about him in terms of like the impact on the show. There's a documentary apparently that was supposed to be coming out soon on Peacock. I don't know what's happened to it, but it's basically, I forget what it's called. Downey wrote that, I think it's going to be called. But like, I just think there's so much that people maybe forget or that gets underappreciated there. So props to writers, and he was the final writer selection that I did have.
All right, so Jamie has James Downey on her ballot. Darrin, James Downey wrote so many politicals. He was basically the godfather, like the man when it came to political sketches. Is that enough to put him on your ballot?
Absolutely, he was on my ballot. Just because, yeah, he's one of those writers who's just been around for so long and just pretty much was just like a cornerstone of all the sketches that came out during his era. Like his stuff was just like topical, on point, and also just very funny. And yeah, he's supposed to. I mean, he's one of the few comedic writers I know who's supposed to have a documentary come out called Downey Wrote That. Like, I mean, you can't say that about too many other writers. But yeah, James Downey, absolutely, hands down.
Victoria, what do you think about James Downey? Does he get your vote?
No, respectfully. He's in what Deremy calls Hall of Very Good, but not of Fame. But maybe one day. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's not to say he's not talented and not worthy. I mean, 27 seasons is a long time. They don't keep you around unless you're talented. I don't know. No one No one tweet at me this time, all right? There are more of you than there are me. Don't tweet at me.
The moral of the story is there's so many deserving people. Yeah. These are tough cuts. Yeah. So, but Victoria, yeah, you acknowledge James Downey's importance to the show. Deremy, I have a feeling by your reaction that you have James Downey.
I'm sending so many tweets at Victoria. Just all the tweets right now.
Please.
All the tweets. James Downey's a definite yes. Some may argue. I think it's a battle between him and Dick Ebersol as second most important person in SNL history. For me, not just SNL, but all comedy, I have to look at as the elites are when their stuff goes through generations, and the generation when it came out laughs at it, and then their children and grandchildren laugh. And to me, just looking at what he did with Norm on Weekend Update alone, and the impact that had when Norm tragically passed away, how everyone went to YouTube and was playing all those jokes. The guts and daring that it took for the both of them to do what they did at that time. The OJ jokes alone, knowing that the person who runs the network is good friends with OJ, and they're being warned about it, and still they're going to go after it. And also, doing what a lot of times, and I know Victoria knows it better than I do, but it's hard in comedy, the easier stuff that can get the crowd to laugh, but they would say, hey, we know this isn't going to make the crowd laugh, but this is the better comedic joke, and we're going to do this, and it might offend, but we don't care, and have that guts, and they got fired for it. That alone, to me, makes Jim Downey a Hall of Famer, and just what everyone would say about him from the original cast to then those Sandler, Rock, Spade years where they were they didn't know what to do. They would go to Jim Downey, and they were like, Downey gave us greatness. He made it happen. So Jim Downey is a lock for me as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I hope this time around the writers get their due. We haven't really seen that much in the voting. The Lonely Island, an egregious example, in my opinion. But yes, yeah, sorry, Deremy. But James Downey, another kind of example of a writer who I think should get his due. So it'll be interesting. So we're coming down the home stretch. The four of you either have one or two left on your ballot. So I want to go back to Victoria. Let us know who's next for you.
Let me see who is left. There are two left. I just don't want to get tweets for who I'm about to say. Don't promise not to tweet at me. But for host, I'm going to choose John Mulaney.
Okay.
All right. No one gave me the bird. That's okay. Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, I think John Mulaney is, some would say, overrated, but I also am thinking about his impact on the show, and then from his hosting the accolades that it got, and a lot of viral moments. I mean, I'm talking in youth, not the but a lot of viral moments and impact he's made on today's, direct impact, I should say, on today's comedy. And that's why I was struggling between this one and one of the aforementioned folks, but I think for today he's such a big staple in the comedy world that I had to give it to him.
He's almost seems like an old reliable for SNL, and he became a five-timer very, very quickly, and I think it was on merit, a lot of it. So, Jamie, what do you think? John Mulaney?
I think he deserves to be in the conversation for sure. For me, there were a few other hosts, most of whom we've already talked about, but that just had the edge in terms of iconic status at this point. So that was my only reason.
Deremy, how do you feel about John Mulaney?
I think it's interesting. I like the pick, Victoria. I really do. I think as of right now in 2023, as a host, I say no. And that could change as the years go on. If he was on here as a writer, I might say yeah, honestly. So that's where I agree and disagree. Because I think he's a Hall of Famer, but as of right now, as a writer, for what he did writing with Bill Hader, those Stefan sketches and Weekend Update, so not a Hall of Famer as a host as of 2023. That could change in a couple of years for me, but if he was on here as a writer, I might have put him on.
And it's interesting to me about John Mulaney is I almost consider him an active host, kind of like I think we still have more to see from Mulaney, and I wonder if that's going to influence a lot of people's votes. So what do you think, Darrin?
I don't have him on my list, but I love Mulaney. I liked his last special. I mean, his impact on the show can't be denied. I mean, he finally got on the Lobster's Diner sketch, like when he finally got to host, and now that's become like his thing, and that's like sort of become a big part of the show, a big staple of the show now. I like him. I think he's a strong writer. I like everything he brings, but maybe not just yet as far as Hall of Fame material.
So John Mulaney, a lot of respect amongst our panelists, but maybe not quite yet a Hall of Famer. So Darrin, I want to stay with you. Who's next on your list?
I guess we'll go to my last pick for host, Candice Bergen. First female host, if I'm not mistaken. First one to get into the 5-timers club. She's definitely broke a lot of ground as far as being the first for female performers. Probably, I guess her most well-known sketch is the one with Gilda, where I think she accidentally calls Gilda by the wrong name, and then the whole sketch kind of falls apart. I think called her Fern, but her character's name is Fern. But I would say Candice Bergen should be in there just, because she kind of broke the glass ceiling as far as being like the first female host, and all the other things she brought with her. So Candice Bergen.
All right, yeah, so we have a groundbreaking legacy host in Candice Bergen. Jamie, what do you think about Candice Bergen being an SNL Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. Like, I love the angle in terms of just like groundbreaking element and like making sure we're like giving our due to those early years. I didn't have her, but good pick.
Victoria?
It hurts to say, but she wasn't on my list this time around, but incredibly deserving.
And Deremy, does Candy Bergen get your vote?
She doesn't, but she definitely deserves recognition. I've heard like Lorne Michaels and other people say that the episode that she hosted was, in their opinion, the first episode of Saturday Night Live that looked like what we all know as SNL. So I definitely think she deserves to get that recognition, but not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, like I said, definitely groundbreaking legacy host, broke barriers. We'll see. We'll see if that's enough for the other SNL Hall of Fame voters. So the four of you each had 15 votes that you said you were going to use on your ballot. So right now, you each have one left. So we're really down to the home stretch. Each of you have talked about 14 people on your ballots, so one left. I'm curious to see if it's the same one or if it's 4 different people that we're going to be talking about. So I'll start with Deremy. Why don't you kick us off? Who's next and last on your list?
Last on mine is Franken and Davis. I go with them as those two were the junior writers on season 1. They got hired by Lorne. He hadn't met them yet, and he hired those two. But those two as a comedy duo, I think about Franken, and you look at from the Stuart Smiley to his Limo for a Lamo sketch, which really altered the history of SNL. You look at it that a lot of people thought that he should have been the next to take over for Lorne when Lorne was leaving after season 5, and did that sketch about, Fred Silverman, who ran NBC, and it's kind of like that Jim Downey thing. Like, he kind of bit himself in the foot there, like, by coming at his boss, but you got to give him credit. It was a good sketch, and it was actually, he was kind of right, too. You look at what Tom Davis did, and he was big on creating Nick the Lounge Singer, Coneheads as well, and so many other sketches. And then when Lorne comes back after that 5-year absence, who's he really tapping? He's looking at Jim Downey, Franken, and Davis as the guys he needs to help bring SNL back for himself. And I look at just the way that they went on for the next 10 years there. So you had like almost like a 15 to 20 year stretch of Franken and Davis, and they're known as a comedy team. And even though Tom Davis passed away in 2012, I believe, they're still kind of brought up when it talks about SNL. You can't say Al Franken without Tom Davis.
All right, Jamie, Al Franken and Tom Davis is on Deremy's ballot. Are they on yours?
The writing category was just too stacked for me this time. I support it, the Hall of Fame worthy for sure, but the writing category was super heavy.
Fair enough. SNL nerd, Darrin Patterson. Do you have Franken and Davis?
Exactly what Jamie said. The SNL writer category was stacked. I was very close to choosing Franken and Davis, but ultimately I didn't. I'm looking at my list now, like, maybe I should go back to them. But yeah, I mean, Deremy made some strong points. I agree with everything what Deremy said, but yeah, just not on my list.
Yeah, it could definitely go either way. What do you think, Victoria?
I'm going to keep it simple and say no. That's all.
Well, who do you have? We'll stick with you. Who do you have next?
It's unconventional, but I think worthy is Melissa McCarthy as host. She has been nominated every single time. Nominated every single time she's hosted SNL. And I think she's such an incredible actress and comedian that she fits right in and is someone whenever I watch, think, wow, I wish she was part of the show permanently. And we could use a Melissa McCarthy on the show always. I mean, she's an incredible addition to whatever she's a part of. I don't think I've ever watched something of hers and been disappointed. So I think and I think she's someone who maybe in like early 2010s, like 2013, 2014, even 2015, had some recognition, but I want to keep her name going. I think she's such an incredible and phenomenal performer.
Yeah, Melissa McCarthy, definitely hilarious. Has she done enough, Darrin, on the show to receive your vote?
Again, yeah, she was like one of the hosts I was really close to putting on my list, but like ultimately I didn't. But like I look at it now, and maybe I should have, but I agree with everything Victoria said. She's like a phenomenal host. She's somebody who definitely could have been a cast member. I could definitely see her just be in part. I don't know if anybody knows. Did she ever like audition, or she just? I don't think she did, but like either way, like people saw her like when she hosted and that Sean Spicer sketch, like that thing went viral, and like everybody's like, oh wow, she's really knock it out the park here. But yeah, like nothing but respect for Melissa McCarthy, but did not make my list.
Melissa McCarthy, what do you think, Jamie?
Wonderful, natural comedian, just next level, awesome. But I think it's maybe a little early for me right now to put her in, but not saying that I would never put her in.
So, Jamie, who do you have as your next and last one that you'll be talking about?
Yeah, so my last one is also a host. This is also maybe an unconventional pick, but I was just looking back and this person actually got over 50% of the vote last time. So I'm hoping we can maybe push them over that last hurdle. So it's Justin Timberlake as host. And for me, this one ties really closely into the argument that I was making around kind of Lonely Island era, bringing musical comedy of a certain tone into SNL, things going viral in just the role that he played in that moment in SNL's history. For me, he was my final addition to my ballot.
A very beloved host, Justin Timberlake. Victoria and Deremy, I know neither of you have Justin Timberlake on your ballot. Do you want to reconsider now that you think about it?
You know what? I did. It was between him and Melissa for me. And it's not to say that, no, I don't.
No. So that's a no for Victoria. No offense to Justin. Deremy?
You know what? I don't know how often this happens.
Uh-huh.
I will reconsider because he was on the borderline for me anyway. And then hearing the arguments about Lonely Island. So, Jamie, you hooked me. I'm going to painfully remove Franken and Davis, get them off, and Justin Timberlake is on the list.
Yeah, Jamie, you got to feel good about that. You changed somebody's mind here. So Justin Timberlake has a couple of votes here on the panel. Probably well-deserving, I think. So, Darrin, you were the one who has one remaining. So now's your time to reveal.
Yeah, I started with a musical guest. I'll end this with a musical guest. Elvis Costello. I'll put him in there just because he's like, I'm a big music nerd and like, he's a fantastic artist. But of course he was he's mostly known for creating one of the most what's the word I'm looking for? Infamous. Yes. Oh wow, we said it at the same time. That's crazy. One of the most infamous moments in SNL history, where he wanted to sing this song "Radio Radio," which is basically sort of like an anti-radio, anti-establishment song about how the radio only plays what they want you to hear, and they don't they're trying to like sort of feed your mind with what the establishment wants you to hear and what they want to be a hit. And SNL told him not to play that. The NBC said, you don't play that. So he began playing this other song he had, I think Less Than Zero. And while he was like halfway through the song, he just stops, tells the band to stop playing. And then he just said, there, play Radio Radio. And then they just go into Radio Radio, a song they were specifically told not to play. And then they just play it, the whole thing. And it's like one of the most punk rock things ever on live TV. And like, I think the story goes like Lorne was like super upset with him, not because he played the song, but because like he messed up the timing of the show. So that kind of threw the timing off on the entire show. And he was banned from the performing on SNL for a number of years. And he came back after a few years, and they even referenced it on like, I believe it was SNL 40, where like the Beastie Boys were about to do.
It was like 25.
SNL 25.
Yeah, right. Where the Beastie Boys were about to sing Sabotage, and Elvis Costello comes in, interrupts them, and then they all play Radio Radio. So, Elvis Costello created one of the most infamous before viral moments of SNL history. So, he belonged to the Hall of Fame.
Excellent. Elvis Costello. And I know Elvis Costello is not on anybody else's list, but does anybody have anything to add about Elvis Costello?
Yeah, I think Darren makes a great point that it is one of the most, especially for the original years, one of the most infamous moments. And it's funny because, like you guys were saying, it was on SNL 25. I remember watching SNL 25 and seeing him perform that with the Beastie Boys, and I had no clue at the time what that meant and why they did that until years later, diving deeper into the research. And it kind of was like, oh, that's why they did that. So I feel like that moment should be in the SNL Hall of Fame. I don't know if I'd put Elvis Costello, but that performance back in the 70s, that moment should be in the SNL Hall of Fame.
Yeah, maybe at some point we'll here at the SNL Hall of Fame, we'll talk about nominating moments and kind of things like that. I think that would be really neat. Of course, this Elvis Costello moment would definitely be up for consideration. So, all right, everybody, we did it. We had a great time. Yes, give yourselves a pat on the back. We threatened people with tweets. We sicked beehives and bayhives on other folks. We convinced other people to vote for Justin Timberlake on their ballot. So I really appreciate what a wonderful panel we had on this roundtable. So before we go, I want to thank everybody. I want to go one by one. Start with Deremy Dove. Deremy, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to promote?
Thomas, thank you for having me. This is my first roundtable, and it was awesome, and I can't wait to come back on with you. This was so much fun. So I want to thank you first and thank everyone. Everyone was so cool. I hear your voices on the show, so it's cool to see the faces. So that's really awesome. And yeah, me and my friend, my co-host Jose, we do Bigger Than the Game with Deremy and Jose. That's our sports history, pop culture history podcast where we like to connect the past to the present. You can listen to our show anywhere you listen to podcasts. We have a YouTube channel, Bigger Than the Game with Deremy and Jose, so you can follow us there. And we're going to keep churning out good episodes that people like. So please listen and give us feedback, like, subscribe, and all those good things.
All right, thank you, Deremy. And Victoria Franso, the wonderful guest who I poached from my buddy John Schneider and the Saturday Night Network. Victoria, thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything you'd like to promote? Maybe your Twitter, perhaps? Or
My Twitter? No, don't cancel me. First and foremost, thank you for having me again. It's been really fun. And thank you to everyone else on this panel. It's so great to meet you. And I hope to join you in conversation in the future. But if you are in the Chicago area, you can find me performing at the Second City Monday, May 22nd, I think 8 p.m. So I'll be there. And if I'm ever in Detroit, you can find me at Go Comedy Improv Theater as well. Other than that, stay laughing.
And Victoria already promised me that she wouldn't forget us when she's on SNL. So, so thank you.
I could never.
Yes, thank you.
I could never.
All right, Darrin Patterson, thank you so much for being here again. Where can the people find you?
Well, you can find me, out here in these streets, these podcast streets, not the actual streets. I try not to leave my home. But yeah, I have a podcast called SNL Nerds. Me and my buddy John Trumbull, we're out here in New Jersey, and we break down all the latest episodes of Saturday Night Live and talk about them and go off on tangents and say bizarre, horrible things. But because now SNL is, it's off the air because of the writer's strike, we'll probably be talking about SNL-related movies and TV shows and whatnot. We just recorded an episode where we talk about Celeste and Jesse Forever, and we're probably gonna do like season 48 wrap up on this shortened season very soon. So please, you can listen to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. SNL Nerds. Follow us on Twitter at SNL Nerds Show. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Darrin Credible, Darin Credible.
All right, Darrin, thanks. And you guys do a great job on your podcast at the SNL Nerds. We appreciate having you. And Jamie Burwood, how can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at TV Show Graphs on Twitter or Instagram, or tvshowgraphs.com if you enjoy pop culture data, combining those worlds together with television. I've got some graphs for you. So yeah, thanks again for having me today. This was a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And some voting matters before we get out of here. You could register to vote at snlhof.com. That's snlhof.com. Go and register and exercise your right to vote for the SNL Hall of Fame. Voting will take place May 23rd until June 19th at 11:59 Eastern Time. So it's May 23rd until June 19th, and then we'll reveal this season's class of the SNL Hall of Fame. All right. So for Deremy Dove, Victoria Franso, Darrin Patterson, and Jamie Burwood, I'm Thomas Senna. See you next time on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Dinant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.